Welcome back to the Women in Movement podcast. We're here with Mimi Midnight, who is a movement performer, facilitator in New York City and online. Mimi has YouTube pages, Instagram pages with tutorials on them, and much more information out there, which we'll include in the bio. But Mimi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for having me on here. My name is Mimi, and I've been pole dancing for over 10 years now and teaching for about 8 years. And pole dancing really led me into sensual movement, which is what my focus is now.
Nice. Awesome. And what was the beginning stages of Mimi moving as a child, like background as young Mimi?
I actually had no sports or dance background. I actually sucked at everything. I was really bad at everything. I was like the bench warmer for the junior varsity team, never made it into anything, and was only allowed into junior varsity because everyone had to be put on a team. So I grew up actually thinking I was just athletically impaired. Never could even dance in my room by myself. Like I would make myself cringe, so I just couldn't do it. So it wasn't until I was an adult. I actually remember I took my very first pole dancing class when I was 21 with some of my college friends. And it was so embarrassing that I never went back. And then I went back when I was around 24, 25. Way different experience when you do it by yourself, because I think it's more embarrassing when you have your friends with you.
Yeah.
So that was the beginnings of my movement experience, is actually as an adult.
Interesting. So, but I still like that you participated on the junior varsity team, even though you were like, I don't know if I'm great at this, but you still wanted to be there and be part of the team and like try something.
I don't know if I actually wanted to. Like it was more, I just remember being in junior varsity softball, and my friend and I would just be doing the wave out in the outfield whenever we had to play. I think I did it mostly for college entrance, like having something extracurricular on my resume other than like genuine interest.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's cool. Where did you go to school?
I went to UCLA.
Okay. And you grew up in New York City, or you grew up?
No, I actually grew up all over the place. I was born in New York, but never actually lived in New York. Lived in like White Picket Fence, Connecticut, and then moved to Shanghai, and then went to LA, and then Hawaii, then San Francisco, then New York.
Wow. Lots of traveling.
Yeah. I spent an equal amount of time in all of those places, so it's hard to say like where I'm from.
It's like, do you go back to visit any of those spots?
I would never go back to Shanghai. But I go back to Hawaii pretty often because my sister is still there.
Okay.
And then San Francisco, I like don't like going back there, but I go back there sometimes because my mom is there. My mom is retired, so she mostly comes here, or we all go to Hawaii, but no one really wants to go to San Francisco anymore.
All right. So let's get into Mimi as a pole dancer. What are your early stages as a pole dancer? What sparked your interest in your early journey?
What sparked my interest in my early journey? My first pole dance studio was actually a very small boutique studio. It was kind of looked like it was in someone's apartment that they just like renovated to be a pole studio. There were only, I want to say like 5 or 6 poles, no mirrors, and it was really, really dark. It was like the red lights, like plush couch kind of studio. It was all about, and it was all barefoot in socks. Like no one wore heels. I think I was the first person to wear heels in that studio.
Wow.
Or to like wear heels regularly in that studio. And that I think really, and another thing I liked about that studio too is like they put you on a series. You can't just do a drop-in class. So everyone kind of grows together and they become really close to each other. So everyone will start a series together and then they'll join the next series together too. And I think what that does, especially as a beginner, is it forces you to stick with something, even if you're bad at it. Because when pole dancers, when adults start anything, they're going to be bad at it, and most of them just quit. But if you stick through it, like past like the 8-week mark or something like that, you start to see progress, and that's when it starts to be like something you want to return to. And there's another thing too about series where when you have all these friends that you're kind of like going through this difficult journey with together, that also keeps you committed. And so I think the thing that actually attracted me the most about pole dancing when I first started was the community And then I guess being forced to stick with it because I was really bad when I first started. So there was really not a reason for me to want to keep going. But, when you commit to this series and you pay for it and you kind of feel like you have to finish it. I will note though, my very first pole teacher, she would make me feel like I had something special. And so that also made me want to keep going back.
There's two things that you said there that I thought was really cool. The part where you said, one, that the instructor made you feel special. And I think that that's something that you try to do in your classes. You do an intentional circle before classes and after classes to make sure that people feel seen in the room. And I think that that's important to newbies as well as people who've been regulars for years. And that's a beautiful thing to see and witness and be a part of. So thank you for that. And two, the point that you made about trying to be good at something that you just really weren't good at and just like having to just have that resilience and know that, eventually it's going to get there, but you weren't even able to see the outcome at some points. I think that's a strong mindset to have, to like not be able to see the full path, but still keep going.
And I have my old studio to kind of thank for that because they were never focused on like getting the trick. They were always kind of like focused. They were a very dancey studio. So they were very focused on like the dance part of pole dance. And I think that's like much more process oriented than goal oriented. And yeah, so I think it kind of like takes you out of the feeling of like needing to accomplish certain things.
Yeah. I like that. I think that this might be an interesting parallel to also your online content. If any of the listeners have seen Mimi's content, she's not just trying to do a push-up or a sit-up or a side bend stretch. She's doing those things with like a snaky spine or like a sensual movement behind it. So although these are simple calisthenic moves, she'll show you this specific straightness in a calisthenics move, but she'll also have some dancey form of the move, which I think is so fun to see that compare and contrast and that like freedom within those basic movements. A lot of times people go to the gym and they're like, those push-ups look great or those dips look great, but like you could add a snaky spine to it and it looks amazing too, or it's just it's not always celebrated. And I think you do a really good job highlighting it in your online content.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually something that was a personal thing that I started to discover. So when we're doing things like a push-up, a lot of people are like so anal about the technique to do the push-up. And it's like, you actually can't get the technique for a push-up right unless you have like this 360 map of your body. Mm-hmm. And if you're only doing something in a linear fashion, like one way, you don't actually get that 360 map. But when you're doing things in a fluid way where you're exploring all the different ways your body can move in that static position, then you start to understand how to move your body into like what they would consider like proper technique for a push-up. Mm-hmm. And so the fluid movement in these workouts is really to give yourself that 3D map of your body, but then also to just like make workouts a lot more fun and interesting. The workouts are more about like the feminine energy and the masculine energy.
Yeah. And I think it is cool to show the contrast as well, because look, you could do a snaky push-up down. You could do a nice stiff push-up on the way up. There's different ways to play and explore with these movements. And I think that it gives variability to places where people don't usually get that variability. And I think that as humans, we should build bodies that are as adaptable as possible. So if you're just doing push-ups in one direction all the time and you're not expanding your chest in a certain way or expanding your abs in different ways or twisting and rotating from the trunk, then you're not going to have the same awareness and you're not going to have the same muscle engagement or ligament engagement, which, might be necessary for certain pushing exercises, especially in pole or dance.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it like broadens the breadth of like how you can move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The breath and the awareness and the strength behind it, the confidence behind it. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. So thank you for bringing that to the public. And that kind of goes a little bit into your instructing. So what was your instructing background? How did that come up? How did that look?
So I think when I first started pole dancing, the Russian exotic was really popular at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a style of pole dancing. And I was the first one to really start to bring that into the studios that I was at, because it was mostly in Russia and I would just learn everything from YouTube. We didn't even have Instagram at the time. It was just like all on YouTube. So I started just kind of emulating that style in my dance. And because nobody else was teaching it, I got into a teaching position pretty quickly. It was probably like 2 years after I'd been practicing pole dancing. It was even, I think, like right after I could even do an invert. So I was like super advanced by the time I started teaching. But that quickly gave me like this sense of, I don't know, I think when you're in a position as a teacher, you are in a position where you can inspire people and where you can kind of lead people and like guide people. And that was a really powerful thing for me to be able to feel as someone who was like mostly mediocre my entire life. To be suddenly someone that one person, even just like one person in the entire world could look up to, it meant a lot to me. And so teaching became the thing that I actually love doing the most. And I think it's actually the only job I've kept for years.
I love that. And it's very interesting that you found this at this point of your life as an adult, that you really enjoyed being an inspiration to others. Like a lot of individuals understand that in sports or something earlier on, but you were able to find that as like a 24-year-old, 25-year-old in this new hobby. That you could be an inspiration to get others moving or living in any way that's helpful, healthy, or meaningful to them.
Yeah, and I think it was also like pole had become to be this practice for life for me. Like because I was so mediocre my whole life, I was never good at anything. Pole was suddenly this thing where I was actually getting better at, and that I was becoming better than average at. And it gave me a framework to how to apply that to other areas of my life. And to me, that suddenly clicked. Like, if somebody just had one thing that they knew how to be good at it, then it's a ripple effect to everything else. And so being able to kind of show that to people and help them get to that point, because like now that you have this framework of how to be good at something, you can actually show other people how to do it too. And to me, it was like, if I can show them this, then they're not just going to improve at pole, but they're going to improve in every aspect of their life.
Right. And I think that the way that you teach in your sessions, like let's take seamless transitions, for example, that's your Sunday session. Right? You will teach one move for the whole time. And I had someone actually mentioned to me the other day, they were like, I don't know how Mimi made this transition take the whole hour. We were sitting on a pole, but we were like, it was a whole hour. And so what I love about that class, and if you want to translate that into life or your life decisions or your progress, it's how do you take one thing and own all the different pieces to it? How do you find all the ways in and out of that thing? And then find the ways that are comfortable for you and which ways aren't comfortable for you. And giving yourself the time to just zone in on that one thing.
Yeah. So this was actually something that was planted into my head from Marlo. Marlo is very much about like exploration, play, curiosity, and then also like focusing on one thing. And in my pole practice before, it's always been like...
This is Marlo Fiskin, by the way.
Yes, the one and only. In my practice at the time, I'd always like been jumping to different things. You know, it's like you accomplish this, okay, on to the next. You accomplish this, on to the next. And it was very unfulfilling. Because then you have like this whole repertoire of things and none of them feels like it's you. None of them it feels like you actually have ownership over or mastery over. None of it feels like something that is truly embodied. It's just like something you have, something you accomplished, something you took a video of and posted on Instagram. But that's it. But like when you really focus on one thing, then you start to see depth in that one thing. It's no longer just an invert. It's no longer just a pole sit. It becomes now like so much in it. And then you can focus on things like that go beyond just accomplishing the move. You can focus on like how the move feels, what is happening in your body when you just do slight micro adjustments in the move, how they can transition into something else, or how they can evolve into being something else. And it just ignites, like that kind of depth, I think just ignites such a passionate form of play. And it gives you, I think it just gives you so much more than being able to do 10 different tricks. Like if you can just do one trick and know it so well, that in itself is going to be 100 tricks versus just knowing 10 tricks somewhat well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So how would you even, if like a student came there, how do you think that that would translate also into their life, not just pole?
Yeah, I mean, so many ways. The first way that comes to mind is actually focusing in like a very meditative way, being present in the here and now and seeing what is available to you where you're already at. Instead of always thinking about what you want, what you could have, what you should have, what you did have. It's more like being here and being like, okay, this is what I do have. What else is available to me right here and now? And I think there's something so beautiful about not always trying to get to something, but more just sitting where you're at and seeing what are the possibilities and being curious about it. That lets you like actually have enjoyment in your life.
Yeah.
Lets you actually be present in your life. And there is so much magic in just that alone about being present.
Yeah. It's like when you go take a walk in nature and you're listening to the birds, you're listening to the wind, you're watching the leaves, and you're doing that in a movement capacity because you're paying attention to the way you're twisting or your breath or the way your fingers are grabbing the pole and all the things in one experience.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, a lot of people are always so focused on the fact that everyone else in the class got something and they didn't. But it's like, well, have you focused on what you did get? Like, have you focused on maybe what you have that nobody else in the class has? And it's like they're so focused instead on like what they didn't get that they can't even see that. And I think once you actually do see what you have and all the possibilities of what you have, because everyone has so much at exactly the level they're at, once you can actually see that and you can lean into that, that's where actually the progress happens. The progress isn't going to happen with you like looking at the other side and wanting where the grass you think is greener. It's where you water your grass. And so it's really about like leaning into what you already have and then trusting that that's actually going to bring you to the next level.
I love that because it's so easy for us to compare and to want what others have. That's just the way that we're wired to do. And it's so empowering to just, again, going back to what you said earlier, be that inspiration for others by exploring your own power. Okay, so let's also, since we're on the topic of classes, let's talk about Movement Lab. So Seamless Transitions is a class you have regularly weekly, and Movement Lab is also a class that you have weekly that's in person. Can you tell us a little bit about that class?
Yes, I love talking about Movement Lab. Movement Lab is like the one thing that I love the most. Like I look forward to my Sundays every week because of Movement Lab. Movement Lab actually started off as a class where you could explore your movement in terms of like what your body can do. And then it slowly evolved to be a class to be about like the soft skills in dance. So you have your hard skills, which is like your technique, your flexibility, your strength, your skills. And then soft skills are more like your stage presence, the way you can engage with the audience, the way you can tap into your own authenticity, being vulnerable on stage or being vulnerable in front of people. And first it was all about being able to cultivate the X factor. And then it slowly began recently actually to be about cultivating yourself. And I think that, like I said before, pole dance is such a great playground for life. Why not it also be a playground for the soft skills too? And so what I've actually been discovering is that in dance in general, not just pole dance, a lot of people are put in this role of like being in a performance, playing a character, performing, needing things to be perfectly executed, needing things to be on beat, yada, yada, yada. And really like dance is a great place to practice being authentic, to practice being vulnerable, to practice connecting deeply with somebody else. And I swear to God, I don't think I even knew how to connect deeply with someone until I started teaching Movement Lab and applying those things to my everyday life. So Movement Lab has really been now a class about how can you let yourself be vulnerable? How can you be authentic in a place where you do feel vulnerable? And then how can you really connect deeply and authentically, not just with like a ton of other people, but maybe even just with one other person.
Yeah, I think that was really powerful when you said, how do you think you can be authentic while being in a place that's vulnerable? Because that is, I've experienced your movement lab class, and it is a very a very vulnerable space. And it is that search to be authentic in that space. And that's a beautiful way to explain the class. It's very hard for people to do.
It is very hard. And I think that's what I love about it. It's like a place for you to practice getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I really want to push everyone who comes to Movement Lab as, yes, this is actually a place where I want you to be a little bit uncomfortable. Like, don't push yourself too much where you're like gonna, it's too much. But we are so used to sitting in a comfort zone that we don't realize that when we just push that boundary just a little bit, you have exponential growth right at your fingertips. And I don't think a lot of people have opportunities, especially as adults, to be seen and to take up space. This is a class where I actually want you to do that, where I want you to be seen and to take up space.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I see why you're so passionate about it. I think there's a lot of very nourishing spaces in there for people. So if you are a listener and you want to try out Movement Lab, can you plug when it happens, where it happens real quick?
Yeah, actually, if you're listening, I would actually recommend coming to my Bushwick classes. They're a much smaller scale. It's called Presence, and that's all linked on my website. But that, I think an intimate setting like that would be easier for people to get into versus like the big, huge class that happens at Incredible. It's also not pole dancing at all. It's just all going to be like about your presence. And I think that is also a little bit more accessible to people who aren't pole dancing and beginners.
Nice. Awesome. And you also do teach at Incredible too. So if there's any listeners who are listening from that studio or in that neighborhood and you want to try it out, it's on Sundays, right after Seamless Transitions. So you have 2 Mimi classes back to back, which I know you have a lot of people that take both, the Mimi Sunday crew. Beautiful, beautiful. There's a lot of individuals I see or I experience conversation with in the halls, and they're always just raving about your class and how good it makes them feel. So I know you're inspiring a lot of people. So thank you for that.
That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah. I do have a couple questions from your audience too, or friends. One of the questions from someone who does take your Sunday class was, where does the name Mimi Midnight come from?
Oh my God, I love that question. I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question. So the origin story is actually a little bit boring, but then the story that happens afterwards is much more interesting. Mm-hmm. I wanted a stage name because back when I started pole, everyone had stage names. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have real names like they use nowadays. We had names that literally sounded like stage names. And I knew I wanted Midnight. And Mimi just sounded good with Midnight, which is why I chose Mimi. It's also similar to my real name too. But the reason why I wanted Midnight was because I was a very shy, awkward, not in touch with my femininity or sensuality at all type of girl. And I felt like I wanted to be this alluring, mysterious, woman of that, I don't know, embodied midnight. I wanted to be that person. And for me, a stage name was a place to, and even any sort of alter ego, was a place to explore other facets of yourself. Because when we're adults, especially, we start to have these traits that people expect from us. So for example, I could say Teresa is not a rude person, but that's not to say Teresa is never rude. And for me, it's okay, I want to explore these facets of myself that seem to be getting smaller as I get older, because these other pieces of myself are becoming bigger, because that's the expectation people have of me now. And so Midnight, the stage name was this kind of opportunity to be okay, what other parts of me could I now place in this alter ego and explore? So my Mimi Midnight was actually a container for me to have that kind of exploration. And it's something that I ask my students to do too, just because when you create this container for yourself, you kind of eliminate the stories that you've been told and the stories that you tell yourself, oh, I'm not sexy, I'm not sensual, I'm not a good dancer, blah, blah, blah. Now it becomes I am this because I'm in the safe container where I can be anything. And so Mimi Midnight began as that. It began as an alter ego. It began as a safe container for me to explore these parts of myself. And as the years went on, it just became the same as who I am in everyday life. And now I just go by Mimi everywhere. Like, that is the name I give my doctor. That is the name I have on my Uber. Like, that is the name that I have become, like, that I have fully become. And I think that's like what's so exciting about these stage names, and why I encourage people to have them, is because you get to become so much more of you. Like, you don't have to sit in the stories that you've been told your whole life. You can create 10,000 alter egos throughout your life and get to explore all these different parts of yourself. And then the more you get to explore that, the bigger you become, like the more you become.
Yeah, I love that. And the more you're able to use yourself in different moments to respond to whatever the situation is, because you have explored those different areas of you.
Yeah.
I love that. So beautiful. It's a great name. Some people might start taking the midnight too.
And it's always confusing. It's like, wait, am I up now? There's been times when I've been like, I want to change my name. I feel like it's something else now, but it's been it's like branded into me now. So
yeah,
there's no changing it.
Oh, keep that. You have a lot going with that name. So much. You have a story in itself with that name. You know, it's so beautiful. Another question from your students was what made you transition from dancing in heels to dancing in socks and barefoot?
That was a slow transition. So people ask me on this online all the time, and I just want to say, I ignore all your messages that ask me about my boob job, not because I don't want to talk about it. I'm very open about it, but I just don't like talking about plastic surgery. It's not my passion. And so it literally feels like small talk. And so I just don't want to talk about it. But when I got my boob job, I lost all the strength in my upper body. And it took me a year, like a full year, to recover. So I couldn't wear heels at first because of that. The heels just added extra weight. It was a little bit more unstable. And so I was barefoot for a while. And as I was going through that process, I started to discover so much about my movement being barefoot. One, when you're in heels, you're so focused on how you look. And I know a lot of people are going to argue with me against this, but it's really like, heels are sexy. Like, you put heels on, your legs are long as fuck. They just look so good and you want to wear them. And I feel like that. I know a lot of other people feel like that. But the problem is, once you start to dance in them, but without having awareness of your own movement and the way you want to move, then it's just so much more difficult. And so then you fall into this bucket of needing to perfect things that you're taught, needing to be taught different things, and not being able to really explore. It took me out of what I notice now is heels took me out of my sensuality, because I became so focused on like staying upright and getting the technique right and all these other things that I couldn't really tap into what I was feeling in my body. Because the feeling I had mostly was like instability or being cautious, careful. The thing with being barefoot is that I can throw myself around and not worry about any of those things. I feel so much lighter. I feel free. And so I went back and forth on going back to heels and being barefoot for a very, very long time. I've been known for heels my entire career. And so it felt weird to kind of let go of that. But then I had one performance where I wore heels, and it was the worst performance ever. And it was in front of everyone. And I wrote about it in my newsletter. But it was this turning point because I was humiliated. You know, it was in front of all these people that I knew. It was in front of a lot of people I respect and admire. And I totally tanked it. And I feel like at that point in my career, I had built a reputation for myself. And there's something with having a reputation that you feel pressure all the time when you're performing. And I felt like I was an imposter after that performance. And so it made me really reflect, and it made me really it like shook me, I think. And I think without that, I would still be wearing heels or trying to wear heels. And it was that moment where it's like, why? I asked myself, oh, well, first what happened was like, I chalked it up to like, I need to practice more in heels. That's what I need to do. That's why the performance sucked. And so I made this promise to myself, every training session, I would put on my heels at least once, even for 10 minutes. And it was in my apartment training one night, and I was like totally putting on my heels. It was like, okay, I'll put it on after like one more dance. This just is so much fun barefoot. And then it finally occurred to me, is like, why am I forcing myself to put on heels when I actually don't think I want to. Is it because it just like looks so much better? Is it because like that's what I get hired to do? Is it because like that's what I'm known for? Like why? And none of those really felt true to me. And so I just decided to put them away. And there are still moments, even now, I still want to put my heels on. But when it comes down to it, it's like, where do I feel the most myself? Where do I feel like I have that sense of freedom that I think a lot of dancers look for? And it's not wearing heels, at least not right now. Maybe not all the time, but not right now. And so that was a big moment for me of like, I need to put my heels down. And then once I put my heels down, that's when I think I had Mimi 2.0 come out. Because now all of a sudden I could tap into my sensuality. I could notice things versus being so concerned of one, how I look, and two, if I'm going to fall and break my ankles, or three, if I'm even doing it right. Because with heels, there's so much like talk about like heel technique, blah, blah, blah. You have to do it this way, do it that way. But with barefoot, it's like, no, I can move however I want. No one's going to tell me what to do here. And it allowed me to discover, like, what is my authentic movement? What is the authentic way I express myself? Turns out I'm actually a very springy dancer, and I'm actually much faster than I usually dance. And it just feels so good. And, like, I feel like until I can put heels on and move that way, they'll probably stay off.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you also were able to, in a sense, this was like an alter ego for you because you were used to dancing in heels for most of your reputation that you have built up. And now you're, dancing in socks or barefoot. It's totally different, but you really embraced it in a new way. Everyone knows that there's like a ton of receptors in the foot, and being grounded and in your bare feet is just wonderful for the body. So it is going to make you feel so alive to just be in your bare feet or socks if you really want to slip. But, experiencing dance or experiencing the sensations from the ground. So I think that it really is an easier way to tap into yourself and not be performative. I did take one heels class 2 weeks ago, which is very exploratory. It was with Tamara, so it was a very exploratory dance. There was some cool realizations with heels, like an ankle weight kind of, but on your foot. So like you could get this different feedback tool when spinning around the pole and such. But I was like, I really love my bare feet and I love all the things I can do with them and just be so, it's also like, there's power, there's springiness, there's there's this vibration that you can feel because you can bounce, you can undulate with full movement all the way into your legs that I don't feel you can do when your foot is stuck in a certain spot.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, I'm not trying to hate on heels.
Yeah.
I do think like there's, now like that I know what I know, I think I could apply that to heels, and heels could be like a great, wonderful sensory experience for me. Because you're right. Now that you have this new weight on your ankle, there's so much more to explore about like that balance and weight. I love heel clacks. I love the edge work and all that kind of stuff. I think those are really fun. But I think in my story, at least, I jumped to heels too quickly. I actually did my journey backwards. I wish I had actually spent more time barefoot to really understand movement before jumping to heels. And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have, is like, as soon as they can, they want to wear heels. And it's like, spend a little bit more time getting to know you. Spend a little bit more time getting to know your movement, and then put on heels. Because without really understanding who you are and how you move first, your heel work is always just going to be a copy of your teacher.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about too. And also just the simple fact of lifting off or returning to the ground, your bare feet are safe.
Yeah, you feel much safer in barefoot.
Yeah. Or even just coming down from a trick. Like anytime you're learning something new, you want to be landing on your feet.
Yeah. That is a thing too, is like, I never did tricks before because I was a heels girl. And then as soon as I took my heels off, I started going up the pole. And I actually love tricks. And it's part of like, tricks just feel safer without the heels on. But also, there's something about, like, I know my body weight as my body weight. But once you put heels on it, your body becomes a little bit foreign. And so stuff in the air just feels a little bit more foreign. And so I couldn't feel as much. So I couldn't really figure out these transitions, couldn't figure out how to do tricks really. because it became like trying to work with a new body almost.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I took the heels off, I was like, wow, I can actually really see all these new pathways in my tricks and my transitions because now I'm in the body that I'm used to.
Yeah, I would also kind of relate that to shoes in general because even when I'm training clients and stuff, something that I look out for is I look out for a toe crunch or any type of motion where their toes are just squeezed in really tight. And it's hard to train clients when they're in shoes. I'll just like really intensely look at their shoes and be like, spread your toes, like relax your toes. It does that toe crunch is usually a sign of like tension or this built up scared nervousness in the body. And sometimes you can see it in your own movement or in others' movements on the pole. But with wearing heels, you can't really notice that as much because the foot is in that extended toe position.
Yeah. I do feel like it's so funny because I went to the podiatrist recently and he was like mentioning how the way my foot is on the floor, it's actually affecting my knees and then it's affecting my hips. And I was like, wow, the feet are really the groundwork for your entire body.
Yeah.
So if you don't like really build the awareness in your feet, you kind of like don't really have the rest of your body.
Yeah. I mean, I've been wearing barefoot shoes since I started training at Chain Gym in 2014. So I've been wearing them for a while. And the first day I put them on, I was like, wow, I have all these muscles in my butt, but I haven't, because I walked around the gym all day training people. And I was like, oh my gosh, my glute medius is like on fire. And I've been working out forever. But yeah, the awareness, once you do transition to barefoot or even just barefoot training, whether it's in pole or whether it's in fitness or just dance, it has a completely different effect on the rest of the body all the way up the chain. Even walking outside in uneven ground and all of that is just wonderful for the body. And we have so many issues nowadays with plantar fasciitis, heel spurs, and a lot of that is contributed to the types of shoes that we're wearing and we're forcing our feet into.
Yeah.
Okay. We also have a couple more questions from your students too. And I definitely want to make sure I get the student questions in because they're most important to me. I think hearing from people that have the one-on-one experience with you often is beautiful. So one of the other interesting questions I was asked is, in teaching sensuality, what have you learned about yourself?
Oh my God. I feel like I've unlocked a huge portion of myself. I don't even know where to start with that question. I might need like an hour to even think about where to start.
We can always go back to it too.
I feel like that one is when I learned about myself. Yeah, there's too many things.
Okay. We can go back to it if there's something that pops up.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to think about which one.
And another student had asked, how do you get over the feeling of feeling awkward and self-conscious whenever you dance?
That is such a great question. There are a few ways you could do that. So one, come to Movement Lab.
Yeah.
But two, so whenever we get in front of people to dance, and this is something that I really focus on heavily in my teaching, is there's a few, you could come up and dance and it's for your ego, right? It's for other people to perceive you as a good dancer, a good performer, a good whatever. You could also get up to dance and use that as an opportunity to create a space for magic to happen. Magic being a deep, authentic connection. When you make it about connecting with the other person or people rather than about yourself, that's when the awkwardness goes away. Because then it's no longer about what your skill level is, what your musicality is, all that stuff. It's more about how can you bring your most authentic self, your most present self to this place so that you can connect with somebody. When we're feeling awkward or self-conscious, we're in our head. When we're fully present, worried and caring mostly about somebody else rather than ourselves, that's when we can get out of our head and be here and connect with somebody. And so that's why I really want people to focus on connection versus focus on your skills or what you're doing and all of that kind of stuff. Because when you're not awkward and self-conscious, all of that actually comes.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're focused more on what's happening in the present moment, then all the skills, all the what I like to call it, will just come naturally because it's an expression. Your body will naturally want to express whatever it's feeling, but you have to be able to feel first.
Yeah. And I think someone that we both enjoy, Marlo, has said, like, when you think about performing, you can always think about it in a way of like providing a service or, an experience for others, as opposed to, again, reflecting about yourself or getting in your own head about what you're going to miss. If you look at it in a way of you are providing a service to other people and hopefully giving them joy or evoking other emotions, then that nervousness can hopefully lessen or not exist.
I think it's really about coming to the true understanding, not just like hearing it and knowing it, but true understanding that your presence is going to be the most captivating thing and not just your fonji or your like split.
Yeah. That's true. Because some people don't know what is hard and what isn't hard anyways. And I have a question for you. Is there any shyness that still arises in Mimi?
Oh, yeah. Shyness all the time. All the time. But I think like now I have tools to deal with the shyness. I'm not going to say it happens a lot less, but my experience of it is a lot different now.
What are some tools? Do you want to share any here?
Yeah. I mean, like the tools being, a lot of it is like the accepting it as, oh no, I don't want to say accepting it, but more just like now I see a bigger picture of myself. I'm not just shy. I'm also this and this and this and this. And so when you have the understanding of like who you are as a whole, then the shyness is really just like 1,000 of all of that. And so it's there.
Yeah.
Like it's just there now instead of being the only thing there. It's like one of many, many things that are there.
Yeah. Because you've invited this midnight personality of you to explore all the other pieces of you. That's beautiful. What would you say is what is most present for you when you're freestyling, when you're dancing, when you're exploring? What do you say is most present? Are there a few things?
I think I don't really understand that question.
Okay, so if in your regular practice, what do you think that you often like to rely on prompts, or do you think that you like to rely on certain sensations, or what are some of your focuses in your practice?
The number one thing that I focus on when I freestyle is sensations. So my prompt for myself is always follow the sensation.
Nice. Love that. And there always seems to be some hair whip sensation in your freestyles or a lot of your posts. Do you want to speak to that at all a little bit, or anything that you?
Yeah. So this might be an overshare, but when I was younger, I was really into the feeling of hair. Like I still do it sometimes. Like I love to rub my hair on my face. And when I was little, I used to like take a pile of my mom's hair and just like sleep on it like a pillow. And so I think it comes from that, where it's just a place of comfort for me, like to feel my hair on my face. And as soon as I started tapping more into my sensuality when I dance, I found so much, like it was almost like a trigger for me. It like would trigger me to just like feel that pleasure and feel that comfort. And like, it's so sensational. Like my hair is so sensational for me. So it comes out a lot. And it's also, I think it's also a product of now moving with my whole body. And so now my head is involved and I have more momentum in my hair whips. Like whenever I would do hair whips before, for example, they were always forced. It was like something that I was like, I'm gonna do a hair whip now. And my hair would always get in my face. Now when I do hair whips or any head related thing, it's almost like a product of something else that happened. And that something else that happened is because I'm using my whole body now. And so it just ripples out through my head.
Yeah. You're using even your feet to just ripple that hair whip up. I just think people should just go down the street whipping their hair a little more often. Every step you take, you just hair whip. Maybe not every step, maybe every like 5th step, 10th step. Try that and see what happens, listeners.
It's honestly like just so much fun. Like the whole hairography thing, it is actually really fun to do.
Yeah, I'm sure. And also I've seen like a lot of your movements with your hair on the ground as well, like getting that sensation against the floor in different ways, or even through your hands, that tactile sensation it could be a very calming state too.
Yeah. Like I said, it's about like figuring out what's available to you right now. I think in that process, I realized like my hair is actually something that is a really big part of the way I express. Something about it, like hair in your face feels so different than like hair that has been thrown back. Like those two sensory experiences are like very emotionally triggering for me.
Interesting. Yeah, like you can't see, and then all of a sudden
it's like full exposure.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about too in itself.
Yeah, even the feeling of like your hair dragging on the floor or your hair like dragging through the air when you're up in the pole. Like it's just such a highly sensational experience.
Nice. Also, we should definitely get into how you have transitioned some of your work online and some of your YouTube tutorials or any other online information that you have, online programs out there specifically based towards feeling sensations and moving with your own body and your truest self. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have two main programs. One is for absolute beginners who don't really have a movement background or who had a movement background many, many years ago. And that is focused on the workouts and stretches that have sensuality added to them. It's really for people who want to have like their fitness regimen, but also start to incorporate sensuality and learn sensual movement or get more in touch with their body. And then I have Unveiled, which is my signature program. And that's for people with some sort of movement experience. And that's all about feeling at home in your sensuality, being able to move more confidently, sensually, and fluidly.
Awesome. And you also have some tutorials on your Instagram and YouTube if people want little teasers as to what's in the program.
Yeah, I actually have a free lesson that's you can find on my website that can kind of give you a taster of what's inside the beginner program. And then if you want a taster of what's inside Unveiled, I have some videos on my YouTube.
I feel like you have given the world so much, even just your YouTube, your Instagram. I think that you're very like, I don't want to say loose but you're very passionate about what you do. So you are like, this stuff is very accessible to you, but also come to your class. Experience the feels if you can, whether it's online or in the actual presence of others is super important. Some other final questions, if that's okay. All right. So how do you like to warm up the room? As an instructor, how do you like to get everybody ready? Whether it's seamless or movement lab or whatever.
I always start and end with a circle. I think like I can help hold a space, but it's really about the people who are in it that make the space. And so it's important that everyone kind of gets together in the very beginning to see each other's face, give each other a moment to introduce themselves or like to be heard. And I always have like an icebreaker question for everyone to get to know each other a little more. That's how I always start off every single class, no matter if it's a strict class or my movement lab class. But my favorite way to start movement lab is actually for everyone to be a bat dancer together.
Ooh, nice. I like that. It sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a lot of fun. I think I would just be flopping all over the place. Just like,
yep, that's the point.
I love that. What do you enjoy seeing in your students?
I love seeing some sort of like revelation or an aha moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even just having picked up something different. Doesn't have to be something new, doesn't have to be something good. I think there's actually a lot of benefit in some bad things happening, but I just want to open up their world just a little crack. And if I see that happening, like that's the biggest thing to me. Like one of the things I love the most is people coming up to me and saying something about that, because I don't know what's going on inside their head sometimes. So like hearing it is also like it's like one of the nicest things to hear.
Yeah, it's nice for you to hear it too. And once they start to say it, it's like they're putting words behind their experience and they're kind of solidifying what happened for them in class in real time. And it's like a journal in a way, even if they don't journal about it later. But a good note for them as well for their practice. And So another question would be, what are you interested in learning about now? Are you interested in some books or programs? I know you've taken some pole programs, teacher training programs. Is there anything that you're interested in now?
Now I've been really focused on my business. So I've been reading a lot of marketing books, which is honestly not that exciting. But I think the movement thing that I'm most passionate about leaning more into is the whole authenticity, connection, sensuality, that kind of realm, which is pretty obvious. I think like something maybe less obvious that I'm really interested is actually breakdancing. I've been doing a lot of work on momentum.
Yeah, cool.
And using the whole body to create momentum, because pole is so interesting in that we have that static point,
yes,
and then that centripetal force that can go around the pole.
Yes.
And so I think momentum is just so interesting. And breakdancers are experts at using momentum.
Yeah.
So I've been really interested in that lately.
Actually, now it's clicking. You know Alex, who has tried pole.
Yeah, he's definitely influenced me.
Yeah, he is a breakdancer who has tried pole through Marlowe and has just loved it because it's another point. It's also kind of similar to, I've met Alex and we were doing parkour like in nature. So it's also similar in that way to where it can be a little bit of parkour plus breakdancing, all those things. Mm-hmm. But it goes back to momentum. And what I think is cool about breakdancing and parkour, like natural movement, running, is that, again, that correlates to what you kind of were explaining in your 3D movements of the push-up, like being maybe a snake-like push-up or maybe swervy side to side. It's that in breakdancing, you are getting the full trunk rotation involvement, or this like spirals that come from the foot up through the body. It's more about movement efficiency and athletic patterning than it is about specific muscle engagement.
Yeah, it's like a whole body experience versus like just your arms in a push-up or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I also like the idea of breakdancing, or I've done animal flow and Alex did too, but the idea of spreading your fingers out on the ground to contrast the pole gripping that you get. Again, the body needs balance. So trying to find ways to have fun and still get those finger extensions in and engagements in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're listening, you can spread your fingers out. We might grip our phones too much. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, we're towards the end. Well, everyone can follow you through your website, Instagram, YouTube, sign up for any of your classes online, in person. We'll include all that in the bio. But I think it's about time for us to give like one final message. Is that okay? Yeah. So overall, I think that you've brought to this podcast this idea of this drive to inspire others and to really meet people where they're at and try to help them authentically be themselves, which I think is a beautiful process. And I think that is also because you have allowed yourself to explore all of these other areas of you, these pieces of you. So you've had this participatory knowledge in these other areas and egos and such. So that also allows you to meet people where they're at and help them explore their journeys. So I want to thank you for sharing all of that. Would you agree with that? Or okay, would you want to add anything to that? Or
no, I think you said it pretty well.
Okay. That's just the common theme I was getting out of different thoughts that you were saying. And is there any one last final message you would like to leave the audience with? Any inspiration or final thought that is resonating with you at this moment?
I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned, actually going back to that question, releasing the ego. Maybe releasing isn't the right word, but noticing it and knowing how to handle the ego was probably the greatest lesson I've learned in my journey. Yeah, and also I want to offer like a free lesson. Maybe we could link it in the description for anyone that's listening.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so sweet of you. Oh my gosh, that was very generous. I definitely suggest you all check that out and message her or even just get some ideas on what that would look like. Thank you so much. This was really beautiful. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a great day, everybody. Bye.